Hello everybody, this video is about 10 tips to help you transition after the loss of a spouse or a partner. And I'm talking, when I say loss, either a divorce or the death of your spouse or partner. And I don't care if you're older, if you had a great relationship, if you were super close, it doesn't matter, because it's difficult for us to lose someone, especially unexpectedly. But even when you know it's coming, once it happens, it's a very difficult transition. I want to let you know I am not a counselor, a doctor, a psychologist, coach, clergy, any of those things. But what I am is wise for my years. And I have observed friends, relatives, myself work through these losses. So this video is kind of a compilation of things that I've noticed that either worked for them or did not work for them. My mother became a widow at 62 years old, so I watched her go through the grieving process firsthand. My grandmother was a widow at 45. I also have many friends that have had either a divorce of a long-time relationship or a loss of the spouse as we get older. Especially a lot of people that would be my parents' age have lost their spouse over the years. I also experienced a divorce myself about 10 years ago, and I experienced the unexpected death of my boyfriend when I was 52 years old. So I've had loss kind of in both ways, but of course I want you to know, of course I realize losing a boyfriend is different than losing your husband or wife of 50 years, but these are the experiences that I'm using to compile this list of 10 things that I think could help you transition after you lose your loved one. Okay, my name is Dawn Dickenson, and this channel is reflections and insights of life over 55. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up and consider coming back to subscribe. And this, again, video is just anecdotal experiences and observations that I hope will work for you. None of them are scientifically proven, but I think I've seen them work for other people, and they might work for you too. Just take what resonates and let go what does not. Okay, tip number one is to allow yourself time to grieve. Realize that you're going to have to grieve. You're going to feel very bad for a long time, but it also varies between person to person. Some people might go through grieving after a few days, will feel much better. Some people will take weeks, some people will take months, and it could even take years. But allow yourself the time to grieve, but at the same time, don't allow yourself to live there. Don't move in, and if you're not working through the grief in, say, a year, 2 years, and you still feel terribly, terribly bad, realize that you need to do something a little more drastic to pull yourself out of it, but do know that it's going to take some time to grieve. Just don't allow yourself to stay there permanently. Number two is allow yourself to experience feeling the terrible feelings that you're going to experience after somebody that you love dies. You may spend days wanting to just cry all day. You may want to sit and stare at the TV like a zombie. You may want to yell at your loved one for leaving you. You may want to cry again. You probably circle through all these emotions, but realize you are going to have to experience the emotion. Sometimes I've heard counselors say you need to feel it to heal it. So it's inevitable that you're going to feel the emotions. Realize that you're going to feel terrible for a long time, and that you have to go through this phase in order to heal and go through your grief. Otherwise, you're going to bottle it up and it's going to come back in destructive ways down the line. So when I say not allowing it, what I mean is don't think that you're just going to get drunk all the time and not have to deal with it, or that you're going to do drugs or go out gambling or do something online that's destructive in order to avoid feeling the pain that you have to feel after your loved one dies. So remember, you have to feel it to heal it. I know it's corny, but it's actually true. Just experience those bad feelings so that you can allow yourself to work through them. Okay, number three, don't do anything too fast if you don't have to. So the first thing I'm thinking of is 5 seconds after my father died, my mother puts the house up for sale the week that we were on vacation and sells it to the first low ball bidder. And I thought that was too fast, especially since we had had a family vacation planned. And about 2 weeks after my father passed, you know, mom puts the home up for sale and sells without any consultation, and very quickly did this. I don't think think that you should do that if you don't need to. Now, there are some cases, if you're a recent widow or widower, where you're not able to financially afford your existing home and you have to move. But if you could help it to not put your house up for sale within the first 3 months of your spouse passing away, I would recommend that. And, you know, that's coming from me. I'm a realtor. So, of course, you know, I would love to sell your house, but I really think it's more important that you process it and make sure you're doing the right thing. Unless, of course, you have to, because sometimes you have to put your house up for sale or put your move to a new apartment or something like that. But if you can delay that type of thing, I would do that. Also, don't jump into a brand new relationship like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm a widow, so I immediately have to find a new man. Don't do that. You can take your time. You don't actually, at our age, really have to find another man or another woman, whatever it is you're attracted to, because a lot of us, our kids are grown and we're a little bit independent. So please don't just jump into the next relationship, and certainly do not get married again within 12 months of losing a spouse. So don't do anything too fast is my advice, tip number 3. Now, number 4, I think this is very important, to learn to become your own best friend. So I have lived on my own probably the last 9 years. And at first it was very difficult being alone all the time when I had been with, you know, a husband and kids. So after my divorce, that was very difficult. But I got to the point where I could do things myself. You know, I could go to the movies myself, I could go shopping myself, I could watch TV myself, do whatever I want, and I learned to enjoy my own company. Now, that doesn't mean I don't love it when my kids come up and visit with me for the weekend or stay for the weekend or come hang out in the night. Actually, I live about 2 hours away, so it's difficult for the kids to just come, you know, watch TV and go home unless I am at my vacation home in Chandler for the weekend. But so I do enjoy it when my friends come to visit me or when I go out with my girlfriends, but there are plenty of evenings where I am alone and I have learned to enjoy my own company. So tip number 4, I think it's good for you to learn to enjoy your own company and to become your own best friend. Okay, tip number 5 is to reconnect with old friends, old family, old acquaintances that you might have seen for a while, and it might feel weird at first. And of course, you want to get through the initial shock of the transition to being alone. But maybe after a couple of weeks, you might want to start texting or phone calling people that maybe you were once close with, but you kind of drifted apart. It might seem awkward at first, and even maybe you'll only talk to them 1 or 2 times, but sometimes maybe that person, even though you haven't really been close in 15 years, will have a change in their life, and the timing is just right that you reconnect, and it's really good for both of you. So I'm going to give you an example. I have a very good friend that I was best friends with in my youth for many years, very close with many years. She had lived out of state for a long time and recently got divorced and ended up moving about 30 miles from where I live, you know, connected by the mountain range of Mingus Mountains between Prescott area and Sedona area. But it's kind of nice that we've reconnected. It's great for me to reconnect with an old friend and have that type of relationship again where we can go out and do things. And I think for her it's good as well, because again, when you're recently divorced and now you're transitioning to living in a new house and in a new state and not having a husband anymore, I think it's good. And it kind of, for me, feels like, you know, the time hadn't passed. Like we just kind of rekindled where we left off. And not that we hadn't been in touch, but, you know, we have not lived in the same state for maybe 20 years. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, because if she hadn't reached out to me, I would never have known, and we wouldn't have had this connection, which I think is really good. So don't be afraid to reach out, even though it may feel awkward. I think that's very helpful in transitioning to being alone again. Number 6 is to find a new passion or reignite an old passion. So it's very good to find hobbies or things that you're really into, things that you like to do. I'm going to give you an example. I used to be into art. I would go to art club. We would have meetings. I would get together with my friends. I would do projects on my own. Of course, my mother being an artist, and at the time when I was younger, when my kids were young, we lived 3 doors down, and I would go to her house every Sunday, and we'd have friends over and do art projects. That was very good for me, very healing, but I have not done that at all in about the last 9 years because I got divorced. I had to reinvent myself and find a new way to make a living. I had been a stay-at-home mom for 15, 20 years, and now I'd not worked in my field. So me transitioning to being a business owner and being able to support myself entirely again sucks up all my time, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't be good for me to pick up art or an old hobby. There's other hobbies too, like yoga, cooking, hiking, book club, going back to church. Maybe you're once into church, travel club, yoga, all of these things. Take a class, meet up with people. Even if the good thing about that is that you can make new friends and find ways to spend the time, get your mind out of your loss and feeling sorry for yourself, and it would be really good to find a new passion, even if you didn't suffer a loss, but definitely if you recently have become divorced or widowed or a widower. Okay, tip number 7 is don't too fast get yourself sucked into thinking that you need to take antidepressants. Because here's the thing, you getting depressed after losing a loved one is definitely not because you have a chemical imbalance, right? It's because you had a trigger event, something very bad happened in your life, and you really need to work through that in order to heal and to move on and to have suffered your bereavement so that you can get on with life as a single person. Now, what I don't want you to think here is if you're feeling really, really bad, or if you're feeling like hurting yourself, or if you're feeling like hurting somebody else, that you shouldn't immediately drop everything and talk to a doctor, because maybe you do need antidepressants, but I don't want you to think the first thing you need to do is run out and get a bunch of Prozac or whatever the latest feel-good drug is, because what that could do is it can just kind of numb the pain, keep you from working through it, and it may prolong your grief and actually could make it work. When I lost my father, the psychiatrist just doubled up on antidepressants, and I really think it made me worse, and it took me about 10 years to work through it, and I was a zombie, and I think a lot of that was a result of being on too many antidepressants. So I'm not saying don't take them, but I'm saying just to be careful, to don't use that to mask your pain, because it could make it worse, it could prolong your grief, and hopefully the best thing you could do is work through it on your own. But again, don't ignore it. If you were in that deep, deep sad state for a long time, or if you're feeling like hurting yourself or somebody else, immediately go to a doctor. But don't, if you're not, maybe consider working through that on your own and not get yourself on a medicine that the farm industry just wants you to take for the rest of your life. Okay, number 8 is if you have just become a widow or a widower, I recommend that from now on, when your friends or your family also become widows or widowers, that you reach out to them periodically just to make sure that they're okay. Because a couple of things that will benefit. First of all, you will benefit the person who is recently widowed, because after about 3 months, now people that were all calling to see if you're okay, they've just like forgotten you exist, and it gets very lonely. So you're reaching out to this person, maybe once a month, maybe once every 3 months, maybe just occasionally say, hey, do you want to go to lunch once a year? I think it's very good for the person who has the loss. But on the same other side of the coin, it's actually good for you, because now you have purpose, you help somebody, you might have also been able to cycle through issues on your own. So reaching out to people that have recently experienced this loss, I think would be very helpful for both of you. And I'm going to give you an example. My mother became a widow at 62, and my dad's best friend, Juan, he was a wonderful man. He used to call and check up my mom every month, every couple of months, just, hey, Marie, how are you doing? Are you okay? You need anything? And just on the phone. So just that phone call every couple of months made my mom feel so good. And he did this until he died maybe 10 to 15 years after my father. So reaching out like that is very helpful. Now, when my mother became a widow at 62, she was like the first of her friends, because my father died so young, and I would see, my dad's friend, maybe he would die and he had a widow that we once knew when we were kids, or maybe someone from the art club, one of her friends, they would become a widow, or one of my in-laws or something, and I would say, Mom, why don't you call and go to lunch with her? And she'd say, oh yeah, but then she never actually did. So that was kind of sad and disappointing. I think it would have been better for both of them, but that's the kind of thing that I could think would be helpful. There's one thing that I do which could be lame, maybe doesn't help anybody, but all of these people that I know that become widows, like my dad's friends, wives become widow, or my relatives, or people that are acquaintances, I will just put them on my Christmas card list. So they get a Christmas card every year. I like to do the Shutterfly picture Christmas cards, and maybe it doesn't mean anything, but to me, at least it's nostalgic for me. And a lot of these people, I really, they were 20 years, they were a generation older than me, so might be strange to call and ask them to go out to lunch, but because they're so older, we're never that close. But I think maybe having a Christmas card every year or something like that I hope that brings them a smile. So that's my advice number 8. Number 9 is to consider exploring your spiritual side. So I'm not saying become religious, I'm not saying to get sucked into a cult, but what I am saying is if you once were religious, maybe go back to church, maybe join a Bible study group, something like that. Or I live in Sedona, the spiritual capital of the world, so I know there are plenty of classes, workshops, books, recording tapes, special churches in spirituality where you don't have to feel like you're in an organized religion, but yet you are connecting with something deeper than what we feel here. I myself I think that's very nice. I enjoy exploring that, although I don't usually go to activities. I'm more into the reading the books and doing the videos and stuff and talking with my friends about that kind of stuff. So if you can connect to your spiritual side, I think that can be very helpful. And number 10 is that you may want to reach out and do some type of grief counseling. So not everybody likes it. Nobody is helped by it. I did go to a professional counselor after my father passed away. I did not go to a counselor after my boyfriend Paul passed away. But what I did do then is I went to a weekend grief workshop, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about. You could also, a place like Hospice of the Valley, so some of the hospice groups will offer grief counseling to loved ones of people that they had in their care, and Hospice of the Valley in Phoenix is just an amazing organization. If they offer you anything and you're slightly interested at all, I would definitely go for it. Now, what I did when my boyfriend Paul died in 2016, it was unexpected. He had a unattended seizure one night, and I went to pick him up the next morning and he was gone. So that was a very sudden passing. And about 5 weeks after his passing, I saw this 3-day workshop in Los Angeles, and it was hosted by James Van Praagh. I love James Van Praagh, but basically all he did was come up the first night and introduce some of the speakers and give a little bit of perspective. So he really wasn't a big speaker. The best speaker was David Kessler. Now, if you go to a website called Grieve.com, that is David Kessler's grief webpage. He is the best grief counselor that I've ever experienced in my life. He was so amazing. He led the workshop. He did maybe 2 days, 4-hour blocks of counseling, of getting people to interact with each other, one-on-one discussion. It was an incredibly hearing workshop. But if you can't just pick up everything and fly to Los Angeles 3 days, go to grief.com, subscribe to him on YouTube and Facebook, listen to stuff, and he's got quite a few very good books. You could also read good books. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has The On Death and Dying, which is one of the best grief books in the history of the planet. So check out those resources. Again, just look for other resources, maybe channels like this. I am not specifically talking about loss in my channel. I'm doing a more lifestyle over 55, but listen to this kind of stuff. If you can attend a 3-day workshop. The other thing that was part of the workshop, there was grief yoga was very interesting, and you might be able to buy a CD or a video to lead you to grief yoga. And then the last thing is there was a one evening session where we had a medium, Maureen Hancock. I actually wrote a blog post on that. If I remember, I'll put it in the description below, where I did have a reading come through of my boyfriend Paul. Another thing that was interesting about that weekend is it seemed like a lot of the people that came had some commonality. So it's kind of interesting that maybe the universe brings together people that need to be near each other. So we had a lot of people that were my age, and they had lost a child. Now, I know you might be thinking, what does that have to do with you or similar to you? But the thing is, I was of the right age with a lot of these women, and my boyfriend was a considerable amount younger. So even though he was not young enough to be my child, it was the age dynamic where we had a lot of ladies in their 50s, and a lot of the deceased people that they were there to grieve were in their 30s. So that kind of also was weird. The other thing is, all of us had dads that were engineers that had died previously too. So a lot of us, this was, 7 years ago for me, but a lot of us had lost our fathers 15 to 20 years. So that kind of came out in some of the groups that we were in. So if you see an opportunity to do some type of group work like that, I thought it was very healing. But if you don't want to go that far, and that's too much, I would say, look at some books. Definitely check out anything by David Kessler. I also recommend, like, my favorite book on all time is George Anderson's We Don't Die. So read books like that, watch videos, and educate yourself. If you can connect up with other people, if you feel like you need to go to grief counseling, do any of that that can help you process your grief. So that's it. That's my 10 tips. I hope you find at least one of the tips helpful. Again, I want you to know I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor, none of that stuff. So none of this is legal advice, medical advice, psychological advice. This is just what I've observed from the losses that I've experienced, the losses that my friends have experienced, my mother becoming a widow at 62, my grandmother being a widow at 45. So I hope that helps. My name is Dawn Dickenson, and the channel is Reflections and Insights of Life Over 65. I hope you enjoyed the channel. If you do, please consider subscribing, hit the thumbs up, and also if you're interested in Arizona real estate, I have a second channel, Living in Northern Arizona, where I do all sorts of videos about living in the northern half of the state and real estate. So if you have any interest in that, please check out that channel. I have it in the description below. I hope you have a great week, and I hope you come back and see what I have to say next week.